Arawaks, Columbus and Two-Party System. A Blink of Time at A People's History of United States, by Zinn.
Howard Zinn, in his best-selling book A People's History of the United States, 1492 present, begins his first chapter on Columbus, the Indians and human progress, speaking about the Arawak people and their courteous and human reception of Columbus. What happens next is detailed in his book. Arawak men and women, naked, tawny and full of wonder, emerged from their villages onto the island's beaches and swam out to get a closer look at the strange big boat. When Columbus and his sailors came ashore, carrying swords, speaking oddly, the Arawaks ran to greet them, brought them food, water, gifts. He later wrote of this in his log. They brought us parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things, which they exchanged for the glass beads and hawk's bells. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built with good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms and do not know them, for I showed them a sword. They took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron, their spears are made of cane. They would make fine servants. With 50 men we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. These Arawaks of the Bahama Islands were much like Indians on the mainland, who were remarkable, European observers were to say again and again, for their hospitality, their belief in sharing. These traits did not stand out in the Europe of the Renaissance, dominated as it was by the religion of popes, the government of kings, the frenzy for money that marked Western civilization and its first messenger to the Americas, Christopher Columbus. Columbus wrote, "As soon as I arrived in the Indies, on the first island which I found, I took some of the natives by force, in order that they might learn and might give me information of whatever there is in these parts." The information that Columbus wanted most was, where is the gold? He had persuaded the King and Queen of Spain to finance an expedition to the lands. The wealth he expected would be on the other side of the Atlantic, the Indies and Asia, gold and spices, for, like other informed people of his time, he knew the world was round, and he could sail west in order to get to the Far East. Late Howard Zinn ends his over 600 pages historic book speaking about the Clinton era and writes, "As we pass from one century to another, one millennium to one another, we would like to think that history itself is transformed as dramatically as the calendar. However, it rushes on, as it always did, with two forces racing toward the future, one splendidly uniformed, the other ragged but inspired. There is the past and its continuing horrors, violence, war, prejudices against those who are different, outrageous monopolization of the good earth's wealth by a few, political power in the hands of liars and murderers, the building of prisons instead of schools, the poisoning of the press and the entire culture by money. It is easy to become discouraged observing this, especially since this is what the press and television insist that we look at and nothing more. But there is also, though much of this is kept from us, to keep us intimidated and without hope, the bubbling of change under the surface of obedience, the growing revulsion against the endless wars. I think of the Russian women in the 90s demanding their country end its military intervention in Chechnya, as did Americans during the Vietnam War. The insistence of women all over the world that they will no longer tolerate abuse and subordination. We see, for instance, the new international movement against female genital mutilation and the militancy of welfare mothers against punitive laws. There is civil disobedience against the military machine, protest against police brutality directed especially at people of colour. In the United States we see the educational system, a burgeoning new literature, alternative radio stations, a wealth of documentary films outside the mainstream, even Hollywood itself, and sometimes television compelled to recognise the growing multiracial character of the nation. Yes, we have in this country, dominated by corporate wealth and military power and two antiquated political parties, what a fearful conservative characterized as a permanent adversarial culture, challenging the present, demanding a new future. It is a race in which we can all choose to participate or just to watch. But we should know that our choice will help determine the outcome. I think of the words of the poet Shelley, recited by women garment workers in New York to one another at the start of the 20th century.
Rise like lions after slumber in unvanquishable number. Shake your chains to earth like dew which in sleep had fallen on you. Ye are many, they are few.